Hi Year 10. So had we been able to go live today, what we would have done is we would have spent some time discussing chapter 1 and the presentation of Utterson. But as we can't go live, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through the key points that you really need to ensure that you understand when it comes to the character of Utterson. So although this novella, and remember it is a novella and not a novel because it's a very short story, is that it's an omniscient narrator. But despite the fact that it's an omniscient narrator, Utterson is our sort of guide through the story. Very similar to Frankenstein in the way that we need to be able to trust Captain Walton, and that's why he's presented to us being a brave individual. We need to have that trust about Utterson, and that's why he is firstly the character who's presented to us first, so that he is our first impression of the novella. But secondly, it's why he's presented as a lawyer. Lawyers were trustworthy, highly educated, and often very noble men. Remember, being a Victorian gentleman was key to reputation, and we hear here that Utterson has nothing but a very solid reputation. So there are just a few parts that I want to read out to you and then talk about. So firstly, the very first sentence is, Mr. Utterson the lawyer was a man of rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile, cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. And it's quite a long opening sentence, which tells us that Utterson is someone that we need to take the time to get to know. It's ultimately setting him up as being a really trustworthy individual. The fact that we're told that he's never lighted by a smile and that he's embarrassed in discourse, well, that should tell us that he doesn't take pleasure in gossip, and that he's not the kind of character that's going to engage in anything that's going to be gossipy or unrespectable in some way or another. They make him sound a little bit dull. He's described as being lean, long, dusty, and dreary, and I think that there's some really interesting adjectives being used there to describe him. And what I'd want you to look at, if you were going to be quoting from this section of the text, is what connotations do we have of those words. Dusty would particularly stand out to me, because what does that suggest about a person who is dusty? We're also told that he's yet somehow lovable, and that's important as well, because that contradiction, and yet somehow lovable, tells us that he is someone who is very well thought of by many people, despite all that's come before. And that should tell us that he's a really good person, that in his heart he has integrity and a really strong moral compass. And we get that idea of that strong moral compass because we know that he's not a big drinker. We're told that he drinks gin so that he doesn't want to drink more expensive vintage wines. What does that tell us about him? Well, it tells us that he is controlled. It also tells us that he's not a drunk, which also makes him a very reliable narrator, because or guide rather, because it means we're going to be able to trust him. We're told that he's austere. Okay, look up the meaning of that word austere. What are the connotations of it? Why is it really important? Why has Stevenson used these words to describe this man? How would those words make him seem super respectable to a Victorian audience? Remember, reputation is really key here. And so, how is his reputation presented to us? We know that he's religious from his references to Cain's heresy, and that's important as well, because think about the importance of religion at this time in society. If he is a religious man who's not going to be morally corrupt, not only is he reliable, but he's also acting as a counter in some ways to Hyde and of course Jekyll. It says It was frequently his fortune to be the last reputable acquaintance and the last good influence in the lives of going down men. What we're being told here is that he is a very loyal friend, that he will not turn his back on somebody when they are engaging in less than desirable activities. And we certainly see that through the way that he maintains his friendship with Henry Jekyll. And I want you to consider again what that line tells us about Utterson. How does it present him as an individual? We're told that he's undemonstrative at best. That tells us that he's not somebody who necessarily wears his heart on his sleeve. But it also means that he's calm and measured. And being calm and measured are often considered to be traits that are very important and that make you seem very trustworthy. We are also told of him that people find his relationship and his friendship with Enfield somewhat odd, because Enfield is very much the opposite of Utterson. He's not morally bankrupt, but we know that he's a man about the town. That means that he may well engage in gossip. It's important that he's used as a character because it means that this story around Hyde is introduced to us in a very clever way. And because Utterson claims that he's already heard it and is a little bit reproachful of Enfield, again we see this trustworthy nature being presented to us. Also, within this chapter, we do see the introduction of the setting, and that's really important as well. We have a lot of information presented to us in this first short chapter. We're going to look at setting in our next lesson, which will be on Thursday, which I'm really hoping is going to be a live lesson, because I want to look at setting before we do chapter by chapter, because I want to make sure that you understand the real importance of this idea of setting. The last thing to talk about with regards to Utterson, I suppose, is at the end of this chapter when he says to Enfield, "Yes, I know," said Utterson. "I know it must seem strange. The fact is, if I do not ask you the name of the other party, it is because I know it already. You see, Richard, your tale has gone home. If you have been inexact in any point, you had better correct it." "I think you might have warned me," returned the other with a touch of sullenness. "But I have been pedantically exact, as you call it. The fellow had a key, and what's more, he has it still. I saw him use it not a week ago." Mr. Utterson sighed deeply, but never said a word, and the young man presently resumed. "Here is another lesson to say nothing," said he. "I'm ashamed of my long tongue. Let us make a bargain never to refer to this again." "With all my heart," said the lawyer. "I shake hands on that, Richard." So that ending, that final section, we see Utterson shake hands with Enfield in a promise that they're not going to talk about this matter anymore. It's also a way that Utterson appears to be silencing Enfield. In a way, very early on, we see that Utterson is trying to protect the reputation of his very good friend Henry Jekyll. Ultimately, that's going to do two things for us as readers. One, it's going to make us want to trust Enfield even more than we already do. But two, it's also going to make us wonder if Utterson has some suspicions about Henry Jekyll and how reputable and Victorian gentlemanly he really is. Okay guys, so I hope that's helped. Make some good notes on Utterson as well, and I know that we've not looked at the introduction of Hyde in this point, but we're going to do that after we've done setting, and then we're going to move on through the chapters. Hope to see you all soon. Stay safe, keep following government advice.